are converted into their usable form.
Okay.
So if you take protein and you break it down into amino acids, those are methylated processes in the human body. We make neurotransmitters in the gut through a process called methylation. All mood and all emotion is created by methylation. Methylation is what determines our levels of homocysteine. Homocysteine drives anxiety, it drives blood pressure, it drives depression, it drives anxiousness. So levels of homocysteine are directly related to our ability to methylate certain compounds. So this is the most common gene mutation in the human biome, MTHFR. Stands for methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. Essentially what it does, not essentially, but exactly what it does is it converts folic acid into 5-methylfolate. So pregnant women are told falsely that folic acid prevents neural tube defects.
Uh-oh, you're gonna mess her up.
I'm not gonna mess her up. That's totally true. But
Don't
folic
mess
acid,
up her brain.
folic acid doesn't prevent neural tube defects. In fact, no human being can process folic acid. Folic acid is converted by this enzyme into 5-methylfolate, and 5-methylfolate prevents neural tube defects. So if you have this gene mutation, which 50% of the population does, then you can't methylate folic acid. And therefore, if you take folic acid, you will end up with either gestational diabetes, postpartum depression, anxiety during pregnancy, and you won't reduce neural tube defects because you're not producing 5-methylfolate. Right? So the most common outcome of prenatal vitamin supplementation is postpartum depression. It's directly related to the prenatal vitamin.
Because you have the gene defect?
Because you have the MTHFR gene defect, which
I think I got tested for that.
You did? Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
That's a good pediatrician.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
that's good.
actually
So if they
impressive.
know that you have MTHFR, then they're
I
probably
asked
giving you
for it.
5-methylfolate. That's
Wow.
good.
Yeah.
That's a good. That's
what
a
were
good
your
OBGYN.
results?
It was normal.
So
Oh, it's normal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So these are partial breaks. So all these genes should be green, right? When they're yellow, that means one parent gave you the gene mutation.
Okay.
So these are all heterozygous breaks, right? I mean, one of these is Kirsten, and one of them is Mindy. They have the similar gene break. The only way to tell the difference is if you scroll up, you can actually see the exact gene break. So this one is responsible for methylating folic acid. These breaks are responsible for upper and lower GI. It's also responsible for adhesion in pregnancy. So if you have gene breaks here, you're likely to have multiple miscarriages because the adhesion process to the uterine wall is not perfected. But by taking the methylated forms of vitamins, you can perfect adhesion and eliminate the the propensity.
What is the yellow again? The yellow is
So this is the MTR.
no, but I mean those are
Like
not
green,
good.
yellow, and
Heterozygous,
red.
yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah, so
Green
we
is
just-
good, yellow is
Green
not.
is
so
good, yellow is one parent gave you the mutation. If they were red,
Mutation.
both parents gave you the mutation.
Understand.
Right? So if it was red, it would be homozygous for that mutation. If it's yellow, it's heterozygous for that mutation. If it's green, it works. Right? So, so both of these characteristics that one suffer from either anxiousness or anxiety.
If
And-
you could incorporate this somehow into hospitals with the parents and read it for the baby, like as they were born, like here's your papers when you go.
Yeah, I
That'd
mean,
be so
the
amazing.
great thing is you don't put anything into the bloodstream that's not already there. All you do is put methylated forms of vitamins, right? So if someone has these two gene mutations, they can't methylate, they can only methylate two forms of B vitamin, right? If they take a cyanocobalamin, they'll get zero benefit from it, right?
Yeah.
And if you think about what B vitamins do in the human body, all B vitamins are metals, right? That's the cobalt metal put into the human body, which is called cobalamin, but it has 4 different groups that sort of drag it around the human body. And then in order to use it, we separate the metal, the cobalt metal, and we put that metal into a biological process. But if we can't pull that metal apart, then we get no benefit from B12, right? So if we take the wrong form of B12 for our genetic sequence, then we may not get any benefit at all from taking vitamin B12.
Can I
Right.
ask a neophyte question?
Yeah.
Methylate. Tell me what that actually means.
Okay, so methylation is also called one-carbon metabolism. A methyl group is one carbon with 3 hydrogens. And if you know anything about chemistry, simple changes in a chemical bond make demonstratively different chemicals, right? You can take a light metal and turn it into a heavy metal just by adding a methyl group, right? So, for example, catechol O-methyltransferase is responsible for degrading mood, degrading neurotransmitters. So if I had someone that had a green COMT and somebody that had a red COMT, right? Completely broken catechol O-methyltransferase. Catecholamines is a group of neurotransmitters, norepinephrine, epinephrine, ephedrine, ephedrone. These are neurotransmitters that are created in response to a stimulus, right? So if this enzyme does not degrade those neurotransmitters after a stimulus, like earlier we talked about, if you take a little puppy and you're in a normal mood and I put a little puppy in your lap and you get this dump of serotonin, dump of dopamine, this elevated mood. When I take that puppy away, catechol O-methyltransferase, catechol O-methyltransferase comes in and degrades those neurotransmitters so your mood returns to normal, right? So let's say this was red, right? And this one was green. If this person gets cut, or let's say this person gets cut off in traffic, right? So they get a stimulus, somebody cuts them off in traffic. They flip the bird, they pop a few expletives, they go around the person. They're like 50 car lengths behind them. They're still feeling that stimulus. Because catechol methyltransferase is not degrading that stimulus after the stimulus is gone. They go home still talking about the guy that cut them off in traffic. And if there's a passenger, they're barking at the passenger going, this is why I hate Miami, I hate all these drivers, and everybody's an idiot, and I don't want to rush out of traffic, and I freaking hate going to work, and I blah, 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 blah.
Well, that's all true.
But this person, if this was green, gets cut off in traffic.
So
And
this is you?
they might pop an expletive and throw the bird, but when that person's 3 car lengths behind them, they just
It's over.
forgot that incident ever happened.
Just shoot them and it's over.
Just shoot them.
And this is why this is the basis of most personalities. I mean, we talked about how anxiety, depression are related to supply, right? The definition of depression is an inadequate supply of serotonin and dopamine. It has nothing to do with a cluster of symptoms. It has to do with methylation, creating enough supply of serotonin and dopamine. Parkinson's is highly related to methylation. In fact, these 2 gene mutations are, you want to see something incredible, take your phone right now and Google methylation and pancreatic cancer.
This is not my
Methylation,
phone.
any phone.
It is
You'll
my
see that
phone,
there's a
right, yeah. It's my phone, you may use it.
97.5% correlation. 97.5% of patients that have pancreatic cancer have both of these gene mutations. It's prevalent in
But do they
97%.
have,
do
do they
anything
have
about
to be red though? Do they have to be red more
They have to be
so?
broken. Yeah, they're broken. They're complete. They're homozygous gene mutations.
I
So
want
These are
as
cancers
a,
of the
to
gut.
know this stuff.
as
Let's get it.
You're scaring my future girlfriend. Sorry.
as a grandchild of a grandparent who passed away with stomach cancer, this all had to do with that. And
So-
it's showing up in our child and my mom.
These are red. You'll have gut issues,
Yeah,
lower GI
it's
constipation,
red
upper GI.
in both spots for Anya, and I don't know where it is for my mother, but it's within their scope.
Yeah.
So
So it's yellow for you, but
it's
red
yellow for me. So like Gary said, you have red.
Sage.
It's pretty self-explanatory. Like
Yeah.
red, yellow, green. She's snuggling
Oh,
up
she's
with
snuggling.
the girls.
Is it only 5 genes that are tested, or
There are little tiny subgenes behind these. I mean, you could test 1,300,000 genes, but most of those are not actionable,
You want
right?
to swap them?
I don't want to
So,
swap them. I just want to
5
see. I
most
want to just see.
actionable
Actionable
genes.
genes.
Yeah, I just want to see the.
Alright, hold tight, I'm gonna stop everything.
I know, I'm like, where are we different? Because so far we're.
So they want to show.
How you guys are.
So she won't show me who's who. So we do this game where
So
I
now
describe the
Mindy and
characteristic and we
I
fit
are
it to
the
the person.
same.
Oh, you
Fine.
already figured it out?
Which
I
is
haven't figured it out. I
okay.
can't figure it out
So
from that
my
picture.
girls are different,
Yeah.
but Mindy and I are same. But
Wow.
then this
No wonder.
subcategory beyond that,
Just scroll down.
Brady's loving.
Is Coral
Sage and I are not.
It's weird.
Coral and Anya are the same. Sage and I
It's
are
bound
not
to
the
happen. I
same.
don't know why you keep
Because
delaying
your
it.
parents hand these down.
Well,
to
based
you
on this,
as
I'm gonna
bloodline.
get-
And he doesn't ever know who he's looking at. She never Sage never shows him, so he can literally talk about us.
Don't look. Close your eyes.
And
It's like the voice, only different. Yeah.
yeah, we are to keep him a dish fry.
I'm not gonna cheat. I don't need to cheat.
Okay, go.
Okay.
There's something weird when you convert it.
So homozygous native. So this MTHFR gene SNP is either positive for anxiety or positive for anxiousness. So this person gets very anxious, and this person has suffered their entire life from on and off anxiety.
Can you explain the difference?
Yeah, so this person borrows pain from the future, and this person borrows pain from the present. So,
Well said.
for example,
Well
these
said,
people
Doc.
will be fearful of an event that hasn't happened,
Hoorah.
Oh
right?
wow.
That's super.
And
Wait,
another
how can
person,
you tell this by looking at that?
Because
Because
the
they say
C-
the same thing.
No, they don't.
So,
they don't.
the C677T mutation is highly associated with anxiety because it skyrockets the level of homocysteine. So this person will have anxiety, right? They're heterozygous for anxiety, but they're negative for anxiousness.
Ah.
This person will be highly anxious and negative for anxiety,
Okay.
right? So what happens is, you know, if so when you have anxiety, you're generally fearful of the future. When you're anxious, you borrow pain from the past. So something that's happened in the past, you drag it forward, and then it makes you
I
anxious
resemble that remark.
today. So something that's happened in the past was more likely to bother this person and make them really anxious, and they will dwell, and then they will overthink it. They'll get into what's called a pattern format, and they'll just think
It
and
has to
think
be
and think
me.
and think
Grind
and
that
think
shit
and
out.
think and think and think and drive themselves nuts.
I was gonna say, do the people know that
Yeah.
you got,
Yeah.
and do they?
We know who's who.
You know who's
Well,
in-
no, I didn't know. No, this is the first time I'm seeing it, but I'm assuming that would be me.
I don't know. I mean, that's
That
you.
would
So
yeah.
you have an event in the past, and you'll drag it to the present, and then
Yes.
they just dwell on it, and it'll
Yeah,
drive.
I ruminate
Yeah.
like a cow chewing its cud.
Yeah. And so what happens to both
Slow
of
it again.
these patterns is that reality doesn't change the pattern. So this person in particular will have things that they that are triggers for them. So things that they generally certain 4 or 5 things that they obsess about. So let's just say that it's finances. I'm making something up, and they obsess about their financial situation. But even if the financial situation continues to improve,
It's
still obsessed about the financial situation,
wow.
right? Or they obsess about going to work because something negative might happen at work, and they go 100 days in a row to work and nothing negative happens. The 101st day, they're still obsessed about going to work, thinking something negative is going to happen.
Gary, substance abuse.
How can you tell that?
Can you you can
Because
fix
these
that.
genes are, because they're highly so I've researched all the sub-alleles. So each of these, if you look at human emotion, every emotion has a recipe. So if you said happiness, anger, joy, resentment, every one of those has a certain recipe. So happiness is a large amount of serotonin, large amount of dopamine, small amount of ephedrine, small amount of norepinephrine, very little catecholamine, lots of neurotransmitters that create happiness. So when you have certain gene mutations, you're able to build certain emotions very easily, right? So think about, again, let's just go back to depression for a second. The definition of depression is an inadequate supply of serotonin and dopamine. So if serotonin and dopamine are made in the gut, and we have an unhealthy gut, then believe it or not, the gut can make you depressed because your neurotransmitter activity, your supply is supplied from the gut to the brain. There's a whole, Dr. Perlmutter wrote a book called Gut-Brain Connection, or
Right.
That totally makes sense.
yeah, and so an unhealthy gut leads to an unhealthy brain. And so, I mean, in the brain, I was talking about this earlier, but when we go back to like the way that our brains and biome function, they're very primal, right? The brain is concerned about survival. I mean, most people don't know that the brain is the most voracious consumer of carbohydrate, right? So 40% of all the carbohydrate you take into the body is consumed by the brain. And so the brain consumes so much carbohydrate that it makes its own insulin. The pancreas makes insulin, but the brain can make its own insulin. That's a fact. In fact, we're one of the few countries
For real?
that still. Oh, for real.
For real.
For real. Insulin resistance in the brain is
For real, for
Alzheimer's
real.
and dementia. We're one of the. We're still
Dr.
one of the
Perlmutter
only.
just came out with that in the spring, saying that they're calling it the
Type 3
type 3
diabetes.
diabetes.
Yeah.
We're still
Do
one of
they,
the
do they
few.
let you say this in front of like a group of professionals? They must want to kill you.
Oh, they all want to kill me, yeah, but they can't refute that, right? So, I mean, you ask a cardiologist to give you any evidence of genetically inherited cardiovascular disease. Where's the gene for cardiovascular disease? Where's the gene for hypercholesterolemia? Where's the gene for thyroid disease? But we say that you have familial hypercholesterolemia, you have familial cardiovascular disease, you have familial thyroid disease, but
And the
there's no
Framingham
gene
Heart
for
Study
any of
would
them.
actually
There's no
argue.
gene for any of those, so it can't be inherited, right? So we're still one of the only civilized nations that continues to call Alzheimer's and dementia Alzheimer's and dementia. Most nations call it what it is. It's type 3 diabetes. If you Google type 3 diabetes, you will see that type 3 diabetes is Alzheimer's and dementia.
Wow.
Really?
There's no question. Because if you think about what happens when you're
That's the
insulin
whole thing,
resistant
so
in
it
your
doesn't
body,
drag out.
right? We can take sugar, we can take glucose, and we convert it to glycogen, and we stick it in the liver, or we stick it in the muscle. But in the brain, there's no place to store sugar. So what do we do? What happens when the brain becomes insulin resistant? It converts sugar to an amyloid plaque, and it packs it in the only space that's available in the brain, which is called the neurosynaptic junction. It's the space between neurons. See, the difference between neurons in our bodies, if I touch my toe right here, there's a constant connection between there and my brain, right? But in the brain, the neurons don't touch. They're synapses. And so a signal travels and has to jump a gap.
It's
If
like
that-
sticky toffee in the brain.
It has. So if an amyloid plaque starts to rise in that junction, it starts to impede memory and cognition. The big misnomer about Alzheimer's and dementia is that people lose their memory. That's not true. People lose access to their memory.
I see, said the blind man.
I need my
I see, you're right, big difference,
clear.
huge
It's a
difference.
huge difference, right?
Wow.
If you went to Walmart and bought a brand new vacuum
I
cleaner,
need
and
it
brought it home and took it out of the
rebooted.
box and stuck it in the middle of this floor and turned it on, it wouldn't work. But there's nothing wrong with it.
Are you saying
It's
you
just
can
not connected to the
reboot
wall.
us?
I'm saying that yeah, you can reboot
You
the brain.
can figure out how to
Well, that's what
reboot
he's
us.
You can definitely reboot
That's
the brain.
exactly
If
what
you
he's
put
doing.
somebody on a low glycemic diet,
We need to
C60s,
get rebooted.
yeah, boom. You know, you can. So if consciousness is here and memory is here, and they communicate through this gap, right? And that gap fills with plaque. If you remove the plaque, they can communicate again.
Well,
Shazam.
you should do a brain cleanse.
We've done tons of them. I mean, you just put people on a
Have
prescription
you actually
ketogenic
helped somebody
diet.
like at the edge of
Can you get like
dementia?
a brain
Do
pick,
you
like
have
a
that?
water
We have a
pick?
patient in this
between the
town
gums?
that everybody knows. So I won't say his name. But he's from one of the most prominent real estate families in this town, who had
I
his
need a
cognitive
water
scores
pick.
fell from the low 8s, which means you could run a multinational corporation, into the high
I do.
2s,
I just need
which
a
means
flush.
you need help with 2
Everybody
of the
does.
5 activities available.
Can we guess
Wow.
who it is?
And now you would know. I mean, he's built everything.
No,
You
no.
know the family, they own insurance companies, they built every major shopping center, every
Brain's so fascinating.
You're
Yep.
semi-related to them.
Yep.
So,
Life
so the
experience
patriarch of that
and
family
everything.
had to quietly.
What's his number?
Yeah.
No.
You see colors.
You said 8 to 2.
Eight.
Where is it? Wait, you got it back to 8?
You know how I
Almost
know?
back to an 8,
'Cause you
but
always
back,
look at
just
the
on
top of
prescription
my-
ketogenic dieting and
You
C60
were doing it
fish oils.
yesterday to me. I was like,
Yeah, I mean, you can metabolize
is
those
she
plaques.
saying?
See, that's the thing about pathology and disease. What happens is
What
symptoms
color
manifest
do
as
we have to
pathology
take?
and disease, but it's not pathology and disease. And he knows that too. You probably see that in your practice all the time.
something.
So the
Slight tweak.
Today after
It's
I've
negative.
been on them for 6
I don't
weeks.
see
and
things,
then-
but I
There's
can see
August.
people that
So
see
these people are really
Like,
similar. You two are really similar, other than anxiousness and anxiety.
I know.
And one borrows past pain from the past, one borrows pain from the future.
Okay, so who do you think
Super
is who?
interesting, but I saw you doing it. I'm
None
like,
of these people know
Anxiety
me.
or anxiousness? Well, Brady knows who I am. So
Oh,
you take from
anxiety,
the future.
anxiousness. What?
You take from the future, I think.
Yeah.
You guys-
Anxiety.
Actually,
Wait,
is this
right up
she's
here?
bouncing her
Right
foot.
up
She's
back.
anxious.
No?
No, it's
Yeah.
this year.
Right?
Mine's
You-
anxiety
okay.
and hers is anxiousness.
Oh my gosh,
But from the past. From
Hers is from the
experience.
past, mine's
Right,
from
right.
the future. Yeah, I thought you said, okay, I
Yeah.
had to think of it.
It's actually
I had
true.
to- I'm
He's
sorry.
right.
Like this
Brady
is a
got
person.
it.
If that's right, I don't.
I'm on
so,
the left and Mindy's on the right. Yep.
Yeah. So
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
I don't know if you are pain from the past, but so if you have past events that
My
that
whole past,
you'll-
Gary, has been
Were you a bad girl?
pretty much. No, it's all.
Pretty
I'm
much
a
my whole
victim.
life.
I'm a victim.
So what's so crazy is, okay,
And neither one of
so
you, if you scroll up here,
before you
neither one
guys
of you.
got
can sleep.
here, sisters,
Oh no, I sleep
Orlo and
phenomenally.
Anya,
You wake up at
Sage
night
and I
start
Oh, yeah,
thinking,
you
are
mine?
very
Go to sleep good?
different.
You sleep
I mean, you
well
could
throughout
put
the whole
Sage and
night?
I in
That's
next to each other and you'd be like,
Well,
what, they're
with
related?
with
You wouldn't even realize it. You'd think that we were related.
Are you a little help
So
my friend?
Estradiol.
But while they were talking
Oh,
about
yeah. Okay,
when
good.
Gary
That
was,
helps.
he's not even seen their test results. Sage hid the names. He knew that there were the two kids, but he didn't know who was who.
Nice.
He just said,
But I can
this is
see
this,
when
this
other
and that,
people
and
do it,
he
it's
said
not
specific. We have it recorded. This child on the right, or this
Oh, I didn't know it was a
person,
child
not child.
even.
He said this person on the right, climbs into bed with mom and dad, you know, a couple times a night, wants to snuggle up. Where this child or person is a good sleeper their entire life. That is Anya.
And one was a
and
rule
Cora.
follower, and
One's a rule follower, one is not.
Yeah, it gives
It's
me.
One
pattern
is,
format
I mean, it gives
is
you, it
rule
like
following.
makes
But
you
it's
want to
really
cry because you just go,
But
okay, you really can have two totally different children.
yeah.
And they're from your bloodline. It's amazing.
See,
But
and
she
this
and
thing-
I are not even related and can have the same bullshit.
But Kirsten and I are different.
High five. High
So
five.
are you- Maybe that's why
We're the
Yeah, you guys are different.
So we're different.
So we're very different.
Yeah.
Wait,
See,
We're not
you would
very-
both have
we
to
are
have this.
different.
This is Sage and
So-
Kirsten?
Yes.
This one's me on the right.
Oh, wait,
Wow.
this is Sage?
Sage is on the right and I'm on the left.
So I had severe postpartum depression after Alina
She
and
did.
didn't understand it.
We cried together.
That's
We
major.
did cry together. You hadn't even
major.
had the baby.
Think about postpartum
I
depression.
cried
because
because
she can't
I
process
just saw
any
her
folic
crying
acid.
and I'm
Gary,
like,
you
I
didn't
get
put her on
it.
the
I'm
bike?
gonna cry with you.
Well,
This
I didn't
was
know her then. It was my baby.
Oh,
13 years ago.
It was my baby.
But I didn't.
It's not my baby.
Not my baby.
It's not my baby. I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Well, she was
Depends on what the
taking the
definition of
prescribed.
is.
Well,
Remember that one?
yeah, I told you to
That's
go.
my favorite.
I got it.
You're my hero. You're doing. Depends on what the definition of it.
So Kirsten and I grew up on Flintstone vitamins, and I was at the store the other day, and I looked at the back of it because that's what Alina was taking too.
Oh.
And I look at the back of it, and it's straight folic acid and cyanocobalamin, and it's
Brady.
literally.
Oh, you get
the
folic
worst
acid
thing.
to this?
So when it, if
Yeah,
you hear,
oh,
if you
that's a
read cyano,
nightmare.
think cyanide.
Cyanide, like it'll kill you.
Where does this come
It's
from?
not
Wow.
good for you.
It'll make
And
you
then
crazy.
folic is the cheap version of folate, which folate is what you want. We talked about that, right? So Sage and I were talking about that the other day. I remember when she had Alina, we were at her house and she was like so distraught over breastfeeding. And I was like, okay, it can't be that bad. She's like, I can't figure it out.
It was awful.
And she's sobbing, crying. I'm like, okay, let's just cry together.
But you know what?
So we
Okay, let's just cry.
Do you know what
We
my doctor
did.
told me though?
I got
It's
this. I'm gonna
okay.
cry too.
Everybody
I'm
has
gonna group cry.
postpartum. It's normal. It's your hormones, but it's not normal because not
And
all
this
of
is
my
why I
friends
said
have
you
postpartum.
need to be here for this because you are
I
about
don't want
to
you to go
enter
through it.
life that's gonna be.
I'll have to
'Cause
look
I
to make
seen
sure I
this-
got tested. I'm pretty sure I got tested.
If you did, that's great because
Yeah.
if they did, then
hope
you'll have the
so.
2 gene SNPs, and it will tell you whether you're more prone to anxiousness or anxiety, and certainly whether or not you can methylate any folic acid.
I got tested and I'm all green.
Ah,
Which
you're
one
all
is
green.
your dad?
Oh, you're
Baby
perfect.
Linda.
No, with John as a
Baby
dad. Yeah,
Linda.
he just drinks straight sugar and still
There you
going.
go.
Yeah.
That's
He live on
true.
like one piece of toast.
He doesn't
and
get
we
fat.
already work
Pull
4
this
days
down.
or 8 hours.
Can you pull that down?
What the hell's wrong with him?
This is the reason why. Is because of this guy right here, homocysteine. Right? That is the culprit. So homocysteine not only is causing anxiety and depression, but that will also cause high blood pressure. And it will cause a form of high blood pressure called idiopathic hypertension because it'll be hypertension of an unknown origin. right? Because all your cardiovascular risk scores will be normal, your EKG will be normal, stress EKG will be normal, heart sounds will be normal, but you have high blood pressure.
So my mom
Why do you
and
have high
I
blood pressure?
both have AHCY, and actually there's not a whole lot of information about it. It's so rare, and we've only seen it in 4 patients. Me,
Really?
my mother, and two other patients.
And thousands of patients.
And I
In
don't have
thousands.
it.
And you didn't get it, but so we don't still know a whole lot about this, but it's interesting because my methylation got thrown. I've been super balanced since April, and I felt really good. And I'll have like a bagel one day, and it'd be like, oh my god, I feel crazy. I can't sleep. I'm all out of whack. And I'm like, oh, it's because I had a
Folic
freaking
acid.
folic acid bagel.
Yeah.
But
Our
then I
entire grain supply is
Did
fortified
something
with
else, and
folic
I
acid.
really threw myself out of whack. And out of nowhere, I don't eat Tums. I don't. He's like, no, because they're yellow right here, you probably have acid reflux. And I was like, but I don't. I never have acid reflux. Because my methylation was good and my diet was good, but it went out of whack. I'm coming, girl. I went out of whack, and literally for the last 2 weeks, I've been inhaling Tums. Like, I wake up in the middle of the night, and I'm like having 4 Tums because I have such bad acid reflux right now.
This is upper
So I gotta
GI
get
and
myself
this is
all
lower
back
GI. So this is constipation and that's acid reflux.
You think maybe you're pregnant?
Right?
I hope not.
That's it, you're coming.
Okay, I just got.
But it's only Friday, so she could,
You can do that.
But it's
Early if you want.
I'll move it around if you want.
You
So
tell 'em,
sage
tell 'em
needs
all
more
the rest of
folic
my
acid
food.
and then methylated cobalamins, acetylmethionine, L-methionine. And then what happens is once that pathway starts to work, you can actually look at blood levels of glutathione, which is a antioxidant that's actually made in the liver. This antioxidant is considered the mother of all antioxidants. It resides inside of every single cell in the human body. There's not a single cell that does not contain glutathione. In fact, now you can do a cellular assay to see how long a cell is going to live by looking at its levels of glutathione. And so if you don't produce a lot of glutathione in the liver, it further stresses the liver. Right? So the liver is not only the producer of glutathione, but it's also the most voracious consumer of glutathione. So when methylation is broken, the levels of glutathione fall in the body. And this is the major eliminator of waste and detoxification. So if you really don't want to detoxify the body, you increase the level of glutathione. And the best way to do that is to fix methylation so the liver produces high levels of glutathione. So in a poorly methylated biome, you'll have low levels of glutathione and a high incidence of cancer and cardiovascular disease. So when you see that cardiovascular disease runs in a family, or cancer runs in a family, or hypercholesterolemia runs in a family, or thyroid disease runs in a family, you can almost always link it to methylation. In fact, if you look at thyroid function at its basic form, the thyroid is managed by the pituitary, right? The pituitary sends a signal to the thyroid produces 2 hormones, but the thyroid produces T3 and T4, but it only produces 20% of the T3 in circulation.
Hey Gary,
It produces
John
all
had
the
a
T4.
So
It keeps raising
if
this.
I'm facing cancer diagnosis, it sounds to me, as I'm listening, right, we have a path.
Yeah. Oh, you definitely.
We have a path out if we don't buy the other sales pitch, which makes everybody millions, right?
Yeah.
So
Think about cancer. Just take cancer for a second. All cancer, every form of cancer in the human body has one common origin. It is all DNA replication run amok. It's cellular division run amok. No matter what kind of cancer you have in any form or fashion, it's cellular division run amok. Cellular division is determined by DNA replication. The DNA splits, replicates, goes into 2 different cells. That entire process of DNA copying itself is called methylation. And if you once we realize that only 60% of the DNA in every human being in this room is even human DNA, 40% of your DNA is viral. 40% of every human being's DNA is viral. The only reason why those viruses don't manifest themselves is that methylation silences it. So people that have poor methylation get recurrent viral infections. If you had mononucleosis as a child, you get Epstein-Barr as an adult. Right? If you had chickenpox as a child, you get shingles as an adult.
Right.
So why do you get shingles and Epstein-Barr? Well, because you're immunocompromised, you have poor DNA replication, and that virus, instead of being silenced, replicates. It's always there. It just replicates, right? I mean, if you look at the if you look at the microbiological physiology of DNA replication, you'll see that 40% of every gene sequence is viral. So if you have good methylation, you never have to worry about those viral sequences. As soon as you have a traumatic event or an autoimmune event or you're immunocompromised and you can't methylate properly, all of a sudden strange viruses pop up. How did I get Epstein-Barr out of nowhere? How did I get Lyme disease out of nowhere? You probably have had Lyme disease for years. It only manifests itself because you became immunocompromised. The virus got, the virus got its attention. So, if I had mono when I was a kid, but I've never had shingles. Right? I mean, I've never had Epstein-Barr. But if I became significantly immunocompromised, I would probably get Epstein-Barr virus, right? And then you get a whole host of other viruses. But that comes from methylation. So this is the sequence, these are the 5 genes that are responsible for methylating the human body. And like I said, the good news is we can fix those. When these are broken, we add L-methionine, which is just a left-rotated amino acid.
So
And
you're saying that you're able to rewrite this stuff?
we can turn all those genes green.
Wow.
Every one of them. All those genes, you can turn them green.
Wow.
Because we know
Okay.
exactly what they do.
So selfishly, going back to because
Back to
I know
me.
because well, yeah.
Anyway, back to
basically.
Mindy.
Basically, well, no, and Kirsten too, but it sounds like she. So I mean, I know where the difference was, but what's like the rest of the story as far as like predictions or what? So what do we
So
do?
if you
with,
let it, you mean if you don't do anything, or
what are the other like
oh, so what are the other
predictions
symptoms?
or what are the
So
other?
if you scroll down on that, I'll show. Oh, here. So
Or
these
for
are
anybody that has yellow.
those are
fever on
upper
those
and
genes.
lower GI symptoms. So I would be very surprised.
So other than anxiousness and anxiety, I guess.
upper and lower GI.
Okay.
So this is poor bowel function, diarrhea, constipation, or acid reflux, or
But it-
sluggish bowel.
But it doesn't
Which I have
mean,
none of that.
which I
That's
have
good.
none of that
And-
either.
Uh-huh.
So the yellow,
But you guys
Probably
have good
because
diet.
we have good
you're
diet.
eating
Yeah, maybe.
from
But think about Jack, Mindy.
I know.
you're
Jack.
eating from that
He's
food
got
group.
bad diet.
So if you're eating the majority of your diet from here, then you're accidentally fixing methylation. I mean accidentally, you're eating a healthy diet, but that's fixing methylation. So if you eat nutrients that are high in folate and not high in folic acid, then you're inadvertently fixing methylation. But I promise you, if you went on a bender of cereal, skim milk, cyanocobalamin laden foods, or you took cyanocobalamin as a multivitamin, and you ate white bread, white pasta, white rice, white flour, white potatoes, you would find that would
So before I got
go
here, I was
awry
at
quickly.
Publix and they had BOGO English muffins. And when I was growing up, that was our go-to. Love good English muffin with like peanut butter,
Oh yeah.
and honey or butter or something.
Little cinnamon.
Oh yeah, with cinnamon, sugar. Oh my god, the best.
Yeah, that is good.
Yep. So they're BOGO. I flip them over and I'm like, I already know what this is gonna say. But first ingredient, enriched wheat flour, and then later
You
down
know
the
what
road
enriched
it
means?
says straight up folic acid.
Wow.
And then
Enriched means
Sugar
sprayed
and all
with
sorts of
folic acid.
nonsense, but
Really?
it's so crazy.
Fortified
that
means
they actually
sprayed with
put it
folic
in
acid.
there. Like they think they're doing us a favor.
So you take a grain, right, and as the grain is conveying its way across the belt, they spray it with folic
It's a
acid.
scam.
That's enriched or fortified. So fortified cereals have extra folic acid sprayed on them. So if you give fortified cereal sugar and cyanocobalamin, so a Flintstone vitamin and a bowl of cereal, and like a high sugar skim milk, like a low fat skim milk, to a child with MTHFR, absolutely a behavioral nightmare. And then they'll go to school and they'll say they have ADHD, they have impulse control problem, they're a behavioral disorder, and they have OCD.
And Big
Well,
Pharma is
medicate
actually throwing a party.
Yeah, they'll medicate.
Throwing a party.
They'll medicate that kid.
Having a-
If you want to
maybe
see,
give
I mean,
17
you
minutes.
want to see big pharma in action, just go to the the American Diabetic Association website if you want to see something nauseating. It's like if you ever said to me, which no one would say, write a diet that would guarantee that I would get diabetes. I would, which no one would say, but it's hypothetically. Well, I would just take all the proteins and fats out of your diet and just put you on a really high glycemic diet. Yogurt with fruit on the bottom in the morning, big glass of orange juice, you know, granolas with honey.
All that stuff.
All the things.
But you know what?
That's why
Some
they don't put this
they
for you.
But you know what? Some people
It's
would get it and
ridiculous.
some people wouldn't.
When we were
All
kids.
Yeah,
the things
but
they
if you
push
go
on
to
you.
the
The labels
ADA
literally say
website,
heart
you see
healthy.
like what,
Oh my
what
god,
kind of
those
diet should I
yogurts
take
with
to
the
control my
sugary,
insulin?
syrupy stuff on the bottom.
Granola with
Don't
honey,
eat them anymore.
brown sugar with oatmeal, yogurt with fruit on the bottom, 58
No.
grams of sugar, and a big glass of orange juice. That's an insulin dependency diet.
How about the
If
acai?
you're hypoglycemic.
Well, I think
Exact same stuff, right?
Because there's just too much
It's like a-
sugar in it. It's a sugar
I
bomb.
mean, most things that are like really important to human function or good biometric function are not rare. They're not 40 feet underground in an Amazon jungle with a root that you need to slice and slice.
Are you comparing me and Mindy?
Well, because I asked, I'm like,
That's
okay,
okay.
other
I
than
don't
the,
care.
well, no, it wasn't even comparing us. It was just like, other than anxiety and anxiousness, like, what's the rest of the story?
So the rest of the story is
Okay.
Yeah,
Rest
I
of the
want to
story.
know
Well,
actually.
Right? Yeah, because I
so
didn't.
this is pattern formatting, right?
Yeah.
So see this cycle right here.
Yeah.
So what happens is homocysteine, which is normal in the blood, is converted. So homocysteine has a methyl group that's added to it by B vitamin. B, a cobalt metal, the cobalamin
Yeah,
metal,
yeah.
gives its life to changing this substance into this substance. It essentially turns homocysteine into L-methionine.
Right.
Okay, it changes its chemical structure. Once it becomes L-methionine, it's converted right here by an enzyme that you don't see into S-adenosylmethionine. And S-adenosylmethionine is the most prevalent methyl donor in the entire human body. If you have high levels of SAMe, S-adenosylmethionine, you can make any neurotransmitter in the body. So when S-adenosylmethionine is prevalent, then you have adequate balance of mood. I always say that physiology is like the water over the rock. It's like the old Chinese proverb of the stream and the boulder. You know, they say if you put a boulder in the middle of a stream, it might take 1,000 years, but it'll wear a boulder down to a grain of sand, right? Because the stream is relentless, right? Physiology and methylation are relentless. They're always there. So if you have depressed or suppressive mood, you can fight it with all the self-help, motivational, positive imagery and humble thoughts and prayer and meditation that you want, but your physiology will
Yoga.
drag you back into the state in which you most comfortably exist. Right? And there are 3 emotive tiers. Like the bottom emotive tier are all the chemical emotions that take very, very little oxygen and very little neurotransmitter. If you think of what those emotions are, right? If you look at low emotive states, anger, resentment, jealousy, despair, mood numbness, those are really easy emotions to access. If you're dead asleep and I pinch you, you can instantly wake up angry. But if you're
I
dead
might like it
asleep,
though.
if
I
you're,
might like it, Gary.
you may like it. I'm not saying, I'm not trying to turn you on.
She likes
That's-
You can also get aroused.
Just want to be clear.
Yeah, just want to be clear. If I pinch you, you're like, hey, I like that.
You should be
But
happy.
if you're
But
dead
it's so
asleep and I
funny.
want you to laugh at a joke, that's such a high emotive tier. You need to wake up. You need to be cognizant. You need to produce more neurotransmitters. You need a lot more oxygen. You can't reach happiness in a low emotive state, right? So if you look at that tier of emotions and then you look at the next tier of emotions like happiness and joy, and then you look at the really high tier emotions like elation, arousal, libido, passion, you're not going to reach those unless you have adequate methylation, oxygen. So this is what's called pattern formatting. So people with this pattern, which would guess would be both of you, have a tendency to think and think and think and think and think.
No.
And
No,
Worry
we
and
don't
worry
do
and
that.
worry
it's called
and worry and
paralysis
worry.
of analysis. Yeah.
No, we don't do that.
Okay, so let me ask
No.
you.
Not once, not
We
once
don't
ever,
worry.
not even one little time.
We don't worry.
Brady's like,
why are
no.
you sitting up awake? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Stop.
And especially like big decisions, forget it. These are the people that go to the department store.
No,
they,
that's
they
why
try
I
on
do
10 pairs of
things.
shoes.
I don't
They take
think
6
about
to the
it.
counter
Like,
and
I
leave
need
with
my
none.
house, I found
Wait,
I'm
say
buying
that
it.
again?
So they go to the department store. They
otherwise
try on 10 pairs of shoes. They
No,
take,
I don't do that.
They take 6 to the counter. They leave with none. Decision
No, I don't
making
do that.
over and over,
Oh, God,
over
no.
and over.
Dylan does it. It's so good.
So they obsess.
No, I go to the
That's why I
counter
avoid
with
it.
one pair of shoes and it's a buy it or I don't.
Totally.
And you're
yeah.
fucking move on.
Totally, yeah, I
So
can't.
that's
but I think
over
that's
over
kind of a coping
thinking.
thing but I think that's
And
kind of
I'm
a
like,
failure
first you gotta
mechanism.
get me to the store.
What's that?
Because I've learned that will happen.
That's true.
So I don't do that.
It's
So
hard
I
to
don't
go to the
overthink it.
store.
I'm just like, so
I'm not a
I
big
Go to the store
So